from the News Channel 5 network. This is Urban Outlook.
Welcome to Urban Outlook. Thank you so much for being with us today. I'm April Eaton. Well, there's an interesting multi-college collaborative initiative that's happening between Vanderbilt University, Fisk University, the Frisch Arts Museum, and it all centers around the arts and sort of exploring sort of themes over virtual episodes with the objective of kind of creating some approaches to living together in the South. It's an interesting sort of virtual conversation that's going on, all of course we're dealing with the coronavirus, right? So I'm getting some experts to talk about some really terrific topics. The person who is responsible for this interesting idea, this brainchild, if you will, is Dr. Maria Campos-Pons. She is Professor of Fine Arts and Cornelius Vanderbilt Endowed Chair of Fine Arts at Vanderbilt University. Thank you so much for being with us, Dr. Campos-Pons. We appreciate you sharing. And I want to start by just sort of saying, how did this initiative come about? What led you to sort of bring a number of different institutions and people together to have these really robust conversations?
April, good morning. Thank you for having me. Well, you know, I came to Nashville to teach at Vanderbilt the last 2 years. So I came here in 2018 to fulfill my position as a Cornelius Vanderbilt Endowed Chair Professor of Fine Art. And one of the areas that I have put more attention since I arrived here was to try to understand what are topics that I believe that through art conversation and through the language of art could be of value for us to engage with. As you have mentioned, the topic that we are investigating in this particular series of conversation is living in common in the precarious South. This is an important idea. This is an important topic, and it's not a conversation that is just coming out of Vanderbilt, but it's a collaborative conversation with, as you say, Fisk University, Frisch Museum, and even to 1 million of conversations, which is an important other organization that is local. I saw that if we start really creating an area in which we could have a common place to discuss and to prepare some of the ideas, not only as a conversation, but intervention in the city. If you have noticed, there are several posters, banners of large size displayed now at Fisk University, at the Frisch Museum, and in Vanderbilt. These are part of the very first conversation that we engaged, which was redefining monuments. The idea of living in common in the precarious South, the series that the Engine for Art, Democracy, and Justice has launched, is to really identify topics that need or that could be valuable to discourse in common. So this is the platform from where we are launching this conversation. The idea was not only to bring together scholars and artists from our local ground here, but to extend the conversation with individuals in other parts of the world. So we had so far artists and philosophers and thinkers from almost the planetary South, from South Africa, Nigeria, Australia, Greece, Brazil, and many other continental and areas in what we call the planetary South. There are a few things that we are interested in with this series of conversation. One, to see the relation of both the academic world with artists all around the world, and also try to explore and expand the internal conversation between institutions in the city of Nashville. So my hope creating is this a series of conversation is that we open a space for inquiry and a space for responding and creating activities, an area of collaboration that enrich fundamentally the cultural landscape of what Nashville and Tennessee is about in conversation with a global war.
To sort of take us through how the conversation transforms, because one of the topics that I watched was redefining monuments, and as you said, you have a variety of players in place, both artists and both people who you would say are proponents of making sure we focus on justice and democracy, right? In that same pool of people talking about redefining monuments, how do you work through that with all of those different players in the mix, in the conversation?
Well, the name of the conversation itself, of the program, is Engine for Art, Democracy, and Justice. And what I try to point out there is that is the possibility for a very close relation of conversation through art, through the possibility of the language, either be music, either be painting, either be a sculpture, either be drawing, either be theater, that the arts is opening a space to really enter conversations that are more difficult. So the fight for justice and the fight for democracy is not something that end. Is we are in the middle of that. This conversation also happened not only in the time that coronavirus, the COVID-19, but also in the time of all the social turmoil and the social uprising that we have witnessed. So what we're doing here is literally like a step back for a minute and get together poets. We have in that conversation Caroline Randall Williams, which is just an extraordinary voice from here, local. We have in that conversation Jamal Sheets, the head of the gallery, the Van Bergen Gallery at Fisk University. We have in this conversation Ibrahim Mahama, located in Ghana, another point of the planetary south, and very engaged with the idea of monument. And we have Kevin Murphy, the chairman of Art History of Vanderbilt, and a specialist in the history of architecture and monument, together discussing how do we redefine monuments in the moment that we see so much anguish and so much turmoil in the idea of what are the monuments that we feel that need to be reconsidered, monuments that part of the population, rightfully so, thinking that do not represent their dreams and do not represent in a way that is purposefully the history that we are all part of. So what we try to propose there is let's sit down and let's talk with knowledge, with information, with data. How do we move forward to this? And how do we engage in a conversation that is not about destroying monument, but it's about historically considering the value and thinking what is needed that is not there. So really a conciliatory conversation, a conversation that is about finding common ground and finding way that all our voices and voices that have been silenced could be here in the space and in the area of representation through monuments.
Let's take a quick break, but I want you to also kind of show a little bit of that conversation, and then we'll continue talking to you, Dr. Campos Pons. We'll be right back.
I've been working, of course, with monuments for many, many years in many different ways. I love monuments. I love looking at them. I love thinking about them. I like using them as sites of contemplation, of recrimination, of questioning, and my sort of curiosity. I photographed them. I've been standing in front of them for years and looking at them. I've been photographing like the empty plaques that have been left by those statues that have been removed, which I think we should also come back to because I have real questions about what should be moved and what shouldn't be moved and why, right? How shall I be moved, right? I think of them as sort of sites of transformation. I've performed inside monuments, for instance, a Holocaust monument in Berlin,